Be seated, please. Order. Thank you, that's right. I will now afford the Honourable the Premier an opportunity to reply to the debate.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Speaker, members of the House. I am sure you referred to this as a debate with a hint of irony, Madam Speaker. There is, in fact, a great deal of farce in the concept of replying to a debate on a speech that I was not allowed to give. I don't know, frankly, if it's happened in any democracy anywhere in the world where an honourable opposition in a democratic parliament debated a speech that they deliberately blocked a head of government anywhere from actually giving. And it was so farcical that I contemplated whether the rules of Parliament anywhere could ever make provision for such circumstances. And of course they don't, because they expect members who are elected to Parliament to be honourable people and to play by the rules and to respect accountability to the public. Because my making the State of the Nation or the State of the Province speech has absolutely nothing to do with me, Madam Speaker. It has everything to do with our Constitution and with the requirement of accountability to the public and with the statutory requirement that I stand here in this House of elected representatives of the people of the Western Cape and put before them the plan of this government for our next 5-year term in office. And other elected representatives in this House prevented me from fulfilling a constitutional and statutory duty, yet they saw no irony in the fact that they could come here and try to run what some may call a debate. But in fact, it was a string of what outside the House I might call lies, Madam Speaker, but inside the House I would not do so, because I know that it is unparliamentary. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Winde was right when he said that this was the very lowest point in our democracy. It was as low as the spectacle that we witnessed on the night of the 12th of February in our National Assembly. And I never thought that we would find in this House such contempt for the Constitution, such contempt for the rule of law, and such contempt for the voters. But the voters in the Western Cape, Madam Speaker, are voters who know how, in turn, to show contempt for public representatives who treat them with contempt. And we will see exactly what happens to a party in this House that tries to out-EFF the EFF when the EFF couldn't even get 2% of the votes in this province. And it was a really fascinating experience for me, Madam Speaker, to read an article penned by none other than Jeremy Cronin, the Honourable Deputy Minister of Public Works, who is in Parliament even though his party never stood in any election. That's another extraordinarily interesting phenomenon in our democracy. Shows extreme contempt for the voters, that you can be the Deputy Secretary-General of a Communist Party that never stands for election, but that always gets into office, and a Deputy Minister nogal, and earns a nice fat salary when you would never dare to stand on your own political ticket. And here we have exactly the same with the Honourable Magaka. He comes into this House, elected under false pretences, on the ANC banner as a declared member of the SACP, and claims to speak for the voters who never voted for the Communist Party. What contempt for democracy, Madam Speaker. What contempt for the voters. And so what else can we expect of a party that treats people with such contempt? Because all they're after, Madam Speaker, is how much they can get out of the system, not what they can give back to the voters, not how they can serve the voters. And indeed, Madam Speaker,
Honourable Premier, if you may, is there a point of order?
Yes, Madam. When we started this morning, you made reference to personal referring to a member of this House. And I'm wondering if the Premier is not out of order on this issue.
I've noted your point, Honourable Magaka. Honourable Wali.
It cannot be a point of order. It has to be a personal attack. And unless he thinks that the membership of the Communist Party is a personal attack.
Sorry, members, if I may, my guidance was personal reflections on members will not be allowed. Very important is the context in which the statements are made. So let's listen very carefully, and then if there is a need to raise on a point of order, we can do that.
thank you very much.
Sorry, Honourable Magaka.
So, on top of that also, referring to a member of another House, also in relation to Jeremy Cronin. Jeremy Cronin is a member.
Honourable Doug Moore has said, he does the racial maths. We do the maths of values, of principles, of policies. They do the maths of race. And they know that if they can manipulate and divide South Africans on the basis of race, that's the way to win elections, because they have nothing else on which to do it. So the honourable leader of the opposition comes here, Madam Speaker, and talks here about natives in this House. That's what he talks about. And I'd like to know which is the party that says there is an oversupply of coloured people in the Western Cape. Yeah, which party? It's the ANC. And who is the party? Who is the party, Madam Speaker, that insults every black person?
You take your seat. Honourable Doug
Madam
Moore.
Speaker, the point of order relates to deliberate misleading of the House. Everyone knows that the person the Premier is speaking to is an individual and was not acting on behalf of the ANC. So to interpret that person's statements as reflecting the ANC is misleading the House.
At the time, Madam Speaker, as we all know, he was the national spokesperson of the ANC and of the national government. We all know exactly what he was. He was speaking for the ANC, Madam Speaker. But if the ANC is trying to disown that particular statement, why are they now trying to impose national demographics on the Western Cape if that indeed is not their position? Of course it is, and it's exposed by their current actions. That is their position, Madam Speaker. But the contempt that the ANC has for black South Africans who exercise the rights hard won in the Constitution to have freedom of choice, to choose a political party on the basis of values and principles and policies, on the basis of values and principles. This is exactly the example I'm talking about. He's implying that every black member of the DA has been bought. So what he's saying is that every black member of the DA is corrupt. That is racism, and that is precisely the racism I am talking about. And if the ANC wants to talk about racism, start with your own racism. You are the most racist party in the whole of South Africa. If we had to imply that black people generically were corrupt, you would be the first, quite rightly, to stand up and object and take us to the Human Rights Commission. But here you can say that every black person who exercises their right of freedom of choice and reads policies and look at values of the Constitution and decides that they are going to support the Democratic Alliance as a result, they somehow have been bought. They are somehow,
Order, please,
they are
member.
somehow Uncle Toms. They are somehow garden boys and tea girls. What kind of racism is that, Madam Speaker?
Order, please, members.
The
Honourable Mdaka.
ANC. Can I just say this? We have a minister.
Honourable
We have
Premier,
a
please.
minister.
Members, order, please. Order, please, members. Honourable Mdaka, Honourable Madikizela,
Madam-
order, please.
Madam Speaker,
You may proceed,
we have
Premier.
in this House an Honourable Minister of Health, Professor Noma French Mbombo, who was a full professor at a university in the Western Cape with a very prestigious position. She made a choice to try and save this country by joining the Democratic Alliance and standing for election.
Order,
But
please,
they
members.
speak generically about every black person. The Honourable Madikizela was not in the least bit interested in joining the Democratic Alliance for a position. So it is their straight racism that generalizes about black people who exercise their freedom of choice, and they categorize them as corrupt, as being bought, and as being somehow subservient, quote unquote, tame blacks. The ANC must deal with its racism, Madam Speaker. The ANC must deal with its very, very deep-rooted racism. Because you see, the ANC is in denial about its own racism. And I would just like to say, Madam Speaker, that there is only one political leader in this country that keeps on dealing with racism, and that is the Democratic Alliance. I have made one speech after the other, Madam Speaker, on the issue of racism, and I have condemned it time and time again. And if
Members,
people
order.
are racist in the DA, they get thrown out. What happened to Councillor Slubbert in the Eastern Cape? All he did, and it was a very serious offence, was forwarded a racist email that he received, that black people could have interpreted as racist.
Honourable Premier, please direct your comment to the chair.
What
Thank you.
Slubbert did in the Eastern Cape was that he forwarded an email that could have been and was interpreted as racist. And we gave him a disciplinary hearing, and he was fired from the party. That is how seriously we take racism. But I've given countless speeches, and my most recent one, and I also put it into one of my newsletters, SA Today, is when I looked at racism specifically by white South Africans. I've mentioned now the ANC's racism, and it's deep-rooted and denied. Deep-rooted and denied. But in this particular speech and newsletter, I addressed white racism because it exists, and it exists all over the country. And I used examples from Kenilworth, from Witbank, from Richards Bay, from Johannesburg, from the Northern Cape, from Cape Town. And I said, I want to speak about white on black racism on its own. I want to focus on white racists because they are all too often falsely associated with the Democratic Alliance. I want to make one thing clear, Speaker, and I do it again today. Our party has no place for people like these. We do not want them in the Democratic Alliance. We are disgusted by racists. We are disgusted by racists. And we are disgusted by the ANC's racism. We are disgusted by the ANC's racism as well.
Order, please.
While our Constitution guarantees them, even racists like the ones opposite us here today, While our Constitution guarantees them the right to free speech, even when they are vile and offensive, they do not have a right to associate or be associated with the Democratic Alliance. We do not want them, full stop. They are free to associate with each other within the law, but not with us. And then I said the most nauseating experience of all is those racists who assume that everyone else of a similar colour is okay with an offensive joke or a distasteful comment. If we turn our backs without confronting them, we are complicit in giving them a platform to carry on doing so. And that also refers to people who refer to other black people as niggers and token blacks and other disgusting, vile names. So until the ANC deals with its racism, believe me, the Democratic Alliance deals with racists. We discipline them. We don't want them anywhere near us. And I'm saying that again today, very clearly. Now,
Honourable Paulson, is it a point of order?
Yes, Speaker. Would the Premier take a question?
yes, I'll take a question.
Premier, will you take a
Yes,
question?
I'll take a question.
Premier, thank you very much for telling us that you abhor racism. What would you do about a member of your caucus that tells black people that they have a short attention span?
As I recall, the member said the people on the opposite side have a short attention span. And to generalize that to all black people is absurd. We certainly don't have any black people on the side of the Democratic Alliance with a short attention span, because they were all elected on merit, not because they're cronies of particular factions, Madam Speaker. So to generalize that statement to all black people just shows how racist the Honourable Paulson is as well. As well.
Honourable
Speaker.
Paulson, Premier, take your seat, please.
Speaker,
Order.
Premier just called me a racist. I'm going to ask that you tell her to withdraw immediately.
Thank you, Honourable Paulson. Premier.
The root of all racism, Madam Speaker, is generalization about a
Order, Chair.
She's starting it again.
Honourable Oliver.
Is it parliamentary that the Premier, is it parliamentary that the Premier referred to Honourable Paulson as a racist?
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Oliver. Premier, if I could address you, please. The statement was made to Honourable Paulson. Do you acknowledge that you said that? Can I request that you withdraw that statement and apologise?
and apologise. I withdraw. Do you want me to apologise?
Please.
Because I respect the seat, I certainly apologise. But I will say also that the EFF is racist, Madam Speaker. The EFF is racist.
Order, please, members. Order, please. You may proceed, Premier.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank all of my colleagues and the Honourable Furlan Christians who absolutely demolished the Honourable the Opposition, demolished them by showing how equity has improved under the governance of the Democratic Alliance, and by setting them right on the distortion of the unemployment statistics by the Honourable Patel, under whose watch, as Minister of Economic Development, the economy has gone backwards year after year after year. So he has a nerve to lecture anybody about unemployment statistics. Because, of course, when the ANC messes up through corruption and crony capitalism, then it's all about the global recession. All about the global recession and Jan van Riebeck. The global recession and Jan van Riebeck are responsible for all South Africa's problems.
Order, please, members.
Now, I was interested to see that in the unemployment stats quoted, while there are 22,000 discouraged work seekers in the Western Cape, and that's 22,000 too many, Madam Speaker, And while we are working hard to grow this economy so that everybody can get a job, it is frankly quite miraculous that our economy has held up so well, given the number of really desperate people who have to come here looking for jobs, schools, clinics, services, everything else. We welcome them, we give the very best services we can, but if they'd had to put the number of discouraged work seekers in those statistics from the Eastern Cape, I bet it would have been 3/4 of the population. And those are the statistics that we need to compare. Because you see, the real scandal in South Africa is ANC governance. You would have thought that governing the country as a whole, Madam Speaker, and governing 8 out of 9 provinces, the Honourable Opposition would have come here today, critiqued our plan, which of course they didn't do, and then told us some success stories from the ANC in the other provinces. Well, there aren't any success stories to tell. You know, one of the most tragic stories, most tragic stories, Madam Speaker, that I read this weekend, and there were many of them.
Sorry, Premier, if you can take your seat. Members, please, can we have some order? We can have interjection, but please not a running commentary. Premier, you may speak. You may speak, Premier. Honourable Magaka, I've noted your comment. Thank you.
The Honourable Magaka is not only masquerading as an ANC public representative, but also as the Speaker right now. Madam Speaker, one of the most tragic stories that I read over the weekend, and the newspapers are full of tragic stories, was the account of what happened when Madiba had been gone just a few hours, and ANC leaders in the Eastern Cape were already phoning each other, planning on how to commit fraud to cash in on his memorial services. Yes, that is what happens in the Eastern Cape where the ANC governs. They hail Madiba's name, hail his name, and then, Madam Speaker, his body isn't even cold yet when they are working out how to cash in on his death to get rich. They call it the developmental state. It is a fig leaf for get-rich-quick schemes in any way they can. The very best definition of what the ANC does at every opportunity was given by Frank Chikane, who was a reverend. He must have really battled, as he did in the ANC, because he says every tender and contract under an ANC government is designed to make someone in the ANC rich. Every tender and contract under an ANC government is designed to make someone in the ANC rich. What I'm sure, Madam Speaker, that not even the Reverend Chikane, who had that insight and who knew what he was talking about, imagined that they would seek also to get rich out of the death of Nelson Mandela. And that is what this party has come to, and that is why the fraud and corruption and insider dealing and abuse of state resources and wasteful expenditure and the billions down the drain is making the residents of ANC-run provinces, especially the Eastern Cape, poorer and poorer and poorer. And that is where the real scandal of contempt for the poor and racism against the poor actually exists. So Frank Chikane said, follow the money. And some of my honourable colleagues echoed that today. When it comes to the ANC, and you want to understand what they're doing, Madam Speaker, follow the money. And I want to tell you, Honourable Fransman, even though you don't have long to go as the leader of the ANC in the Western Cape, we will still follow the money that you have to account for in SOPA. We will follow that money till the very end until you do appear in SOPA or appear in court, one of the two. because you may not have contempt for SCOPA, and you will come and answer the questions in SCOPA, because believe me, Honourable Leader of the Opposition, we are following the money.
Point of order.
Point of order, Speaker.
Premier, would you take your seat, please? Honourable Veerwinkel.
Speaker, I'm going to invoke, first of all, Rule 41 again, which you have been doing, and that is maintaining order in the House. You have been doing that. But I also want to remind you, Speaker, this morning you made an impassioned plea that the quorum of this House should remain, that personal attacks should not be the order of the day. Can you please, Speaker, I'm beseeching you to please implore the Premier to adhere to that rule so that we do not, I'm still on my feet, so that we do not have to jump up here every 5 minutes to remind the Speaker of what you asked us to do. Please, Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Veerwinkel.
This is a matter before Parliament, Madam Speaker. The fact that the Honourable Fransman refuses to come to SCOPA is a matter for record. And if that cannot be discussed in this Parliament, I don't know what can be. It cannot be, Madam Speaker,
Sorry.
that...
Honourable Premier, there's a point of order.
Speaker, I am also a member of SCOPA, and if I remember correctly, that process is actually almost at court, and it is a process that still needs to be followed. In fact, if I can drop something here that I shouldn't, but I'd rather leave it, because you also know that that issue is going to go in a direction that the DA will not like. So I'd prefer that the... I'm on my feet. Why is the Chief Whip standing?
Honourable Veerwinkel.
Does this every time,
Honourable
Speaker?
Wiley, please take your seat. Honourable Veerwinkel is on the floor. Take your seat, please.
Thank you, Speaker. I will listen to your ruling because there is only one Speaker in this House.
I'll address you, please. The way I understand the rules is, if someone stands up and they say it's a point of order, but it's not a point of order, and an office bearer like myself as a Chief Whip stands up to counter that, because she's getting free airtime.
Honourable Veerwinkel.
The honourable
Honourable
member
Veerwinkel.
is getting free airtime on an issue that is not a point of order. It's surely the right of the other side to stop that free airtime.
On a point of order.
Honourable Dagmore.
Speaker, I'm sure you're aware of the fact that our rules indicate very clearly that where a matter is before the courts, and my understanding from my colleagues in the Public Accounts Committee is that this particular matter, there's an application that is in the High Court, there's a process underway. Yet members continue to reflect on this, and I'm being interrupted again, Speaker.
Order, please, members.
So could you please rule on whether this reflection by the Premier is not in contradiction with our standing rules?
Okay. Honourable Dagmore, sorry, Premier, before we go, the matter is yes before SCOPA. However, there is a challenge in that every point would need to be addressed on its merit. I cannot make a blanket decision because I don't know and I can't preempt the context of the statement. We cannot attack the individual. I requested that, and I repeat that where I said personal reflections on members will not be allowed. And I concur with the House that we respect that rule. Thank you. Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I am sure that we know that parliamentary privilege allows far more freedom of speech in the House than outside the House. So I'm sure we would never want to have a parliament where there was less freedom of speech inside the House than outside the House. And obviously, the matter of the Honourable Fransman refusing, with the Honourable Ace, to appear before SCOPA is a very serious matter indeed. It reflects the kind of contempt that the Honourable Opposition showed for the House and for the voters last Friday, and we will keep on raising it in this House, and we will keep on discussing it, and we will keep on following the money. Just as, Madam Speaker, we will continue to follow the 41 million rand of lotto money that the Sunday Times said the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition, used to buy votes for the ANC. Yes, the Sunday Times, and he didn't refute it. He didn't refute it. So in fact, the Sunday Times article stands that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition used his influence to get 41 million rand of lotto money to buy votes for the ANC in the Western Cape.
Oh, that's rubbish. Order.
Take a seat, please, Premier.
Point of
Honourable
order,
Gillian.
Madam Speaker. I am also going to remind you of your ruling when we opened this House.
Correct.
And I am really, Madam Speaker, on my feet, and I don't want, and the ANC has agreed that we will sit in the sitting, discipline, and I am really counting on your leadership, Madam Speaker,
Honourable
to
Gillian.
impose your ruling when you opened this House this morning.
Thank you, Honourable Gillian. Your comments are noted. I think there are two matters. The one is around attacking the person, and here I need to talk to the sub judice rule, which says no member may refer to any matter on which a judicial decision is pending, and I think that creates the context. No judicial decision is pending as the parties have filed papers. The matter is not ready for hearing evidence. So I think that's the other aspect which we need to consider. In terms of the comment, I would say that I would refer to Hansard, but the matter being referred to is in the public domain, in that it is in the media, so it is not an attack on a person, it is talking to a media matter. So I think I've made myself clear around sub judice and where we are. Thank you, Honourable
Absolutely.
Premier.
The sub judice rule is often abused, Madam Speaker, and thank you very much for saying that it's got to be on a judicial decision that is pending, not when a matter is going to court. So, Madam Speaker, it is in the public domain that there have been clear allegations that the 41 million rand that was got from the lotto was used by the ANC in the Western Cape, and specifically by the Honourable Fransman, to buy votes and to buy the minstrels. And when you think of all the charities for disabled children and others that have been unable to get lotto money, and the ANC allegedly used 41 million as a vote-buying exercise, you have to ask the Department of Trade and Industry, under another communist, why it is that a political party is allowed to influence the disbursement of lotto funds. Just another example of ANC corruption. Madam Speaker, follow the money. There is a lot of money in lotto, and it's under the Department of Trade and Industry, and believe me, we won't stop until we have followed that money to the very end. What we do when we find it is make sure that people are charged, but because the bottom line is that under President Zuma, he has ensured that all the institutions are there to protect his friends and persecute his opponents. It will depend on whether Maurice Fransman is by that stage on the right side of the president or on the wrong side of the president,
members.
as to whether he gets prosecuted or protected.
Premier, can you take your seat, please? The Honourable Mgaka.
Speaker, on a point of order, is it parliamentary for the Premier as number one in this legislature, who is a custodian of these rules of order, to refer to a member by his name without giving that honorable word that is important? You know, I'm worried, Chairperson, because the Premier is not playing her leadership role here. Is supposed to lead us by example, but she is the most disruptive person in this legislature.
Okay. May I ask, Premier, before you speak, members of the House, when you address each other, please address each other as honourable members. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. For Fransman is an honourable man. Fransman is an honourable man. So are they all honourable men.
Order. Order, please, members.
The honourable member of the EFF, just like he has read Les Miserables, has clearly also read Julius Caesar by Shakespeare. So are they all honourable men.
Honourable
There's
Paulson.
another racist statement, Madam Speaker. There's another racist statement.
Honourable Paulson, take your seat, please, Premier. I think that was a clear-up statement that you made. You actually said, and I heard it.
I asked if she's surprised that a black person can read. How is that racist? I'm not going to withdraw it.
Member Paulson, you said, are you surprised?
It's a question.
We shall refer to Hansard, and I will revert if necessary. Thank you.
That shows another example of the type of generalisation that underpins the racism of the EFF and the ANC. Now, I'm really fascinated by the distortion of the Honourable Dugmore of the notion of the Open Opportunity Society for All, an idea that is embedded in the preamble of our Constitution. And because I was prevented from presenting our strategic plan for our 5-year term, we're having a nonsensical debate about a speech that was never given. So I'm going to use my time remaining, Madam Speaker, to go through some of the key points of the speech and show how it fundamentally differs from what the ANC is failing to do in other provinces. The Open Society is in the preamble of our Constitution, and it reflects a society in which there are real opportunities so that people can use their freedoms to improve their lives. That is what we are talking about. That is not only the vision that underpins the Constitution, Madam Speaker, it underpins the National Development Plan, Speaker.
Order. Honourable Paulson. Interjection. Thank you. You may proceed, Premier.
Madam Speaker, the Honourable Dugmore has asked me to speak about redress. Many speakers before me on this side of the House have spoken about redress. They have brought the facts and figures and hard statistics, and they have shown that life is much, much better for the poor in the Western Cape than it is in any other province. Poor people are not stupid. They wouldn't come here if life was worse. They come here because life is better. And on equity statistics, and on contract statistics, and on free basic services statistics, and on unemployment statistics, the Western Cape is much better than any other province, and that is redress. That is redress.
Order, members.
And so, many people have spoken about this, if the Honourable Dugmore was listening. But I want to answer a few questions that he put to me.
Order, Honourable Paulson. Order, please.
I would like to answer a few questions that he put to me, Madam Speaker. He said that I should not have walked out of Parliament when armed policemen invaded the National Assembly, just as under Charles I, in a democracy elsewhere, sent armed security into a house to remove public representatives. He says that I should not have walked out of Parliament, and that you, Honourable Speaker, should not have walked out of Parliament because we did not have a mandate from this House. Let me enlighten the Honourable Dugmore. I have a mandate from the voters of the Western Cape to uphold the Constitution. And I've rarely in the history of our democracy seen such a blatant constitutional violation in the House of the Representatives of the People as I saw that night. I will speak about that issue. I will speak about that issue. I will do.
Order, members. Order, please.
There is a fundamental difference.
Order, members.
I don't think the Honourable Fransman understands the principle involved. No, because I'm black, yes, then I don't understand.
self-inflicted.
Order, please, members.
That's an exact example of the racism of the ANC again, Madam Speaker. It's exactly the same as the Honourable Dugmore saying that because I refer to Minister Oliphant, I'm calling all black women elephants. That's right. I'm saying Honourable
please,
Francois
members.
doesn't understand the point, but every black member on this side of the House does understand the point. So I'm making no generalizations about black people. I'm
Order,
referring
please, members.
to one person, and that is the Honourable Francois.
Premier?
He is
Premier,
the
could you
leader
please
of a...
take your seat. Sorry, Honourable Francois, there is a member of your party on the floor. You may speak.
Thanks,
Honourable
Speaker.
Mugaka, you have a member on the floor.
Speaker, Rule 51A states that a member may speak on the question on the House. Really, I've been long waiting for the Premier to speak on the state of the province. Instead of responding to everyone, we're still waiting unless she has nothing to say.
Sorry, I think the Premier's...
Honourable Speaker, the Honourable Opposition prevented me from giving the State of the Province address, and now they're insisting that I speak to the debate on the State of the Province address. What kind of irony is that, Madam Speaker?
Premier, take your seat. Honourable Francois. Order, please,
Honourable
members.
Speaker.
There's a speaker on the floor. Order, please.
Honourable Speaker, the very essence of assuming that because we are predominantly black members of Parliament this side of the House, in the very essence in the Premier's DNA, there must be a question around a racist interpretation of analysing us. I think that's the issue here.
Sorry, Premier, please take your seat. Honourable Francois, you made a statement. What is your point of order?
I'm saying with consistent reference to us predominantly as black individuals this side of the House, both herself and Chief Whip Wiley, it actually tells us politically what, ek wil amper sê hulle onderrok van rasisme hang uit. That's the
Honourable
word.
Francois, I must, Honourable Wiley, please take your seat. I did, though, hear you, Honourable Francois, say that you are black. You said it yourself in this House. So let's accept that that was said. You did state it, not once, but twice. You said, I am black, and I know who I am. So I think that point is taken. Honourable Wiley.
Speaker, this is going to drag on for a very long evening because I know that the Premier is not going to give up.
Okay.
And the fact of the matter is the rules do make provision for points of order, but it also says frivolous points of order and interjections of this nature are not to be tolerated. The fact of the matter is because I said that at that side of the House, that includes every member, men, women, all races, and there are people of white colour on that side of the House. I talk about them as a party in the same, so does the Premier, and she's entitled to do so.
Member Wiley, we've moved on from that point. We've had the debate. Can we please proceed with the business of the day? Members, I'm appealing to you. It has been a long day. Let's practice tolerance and patience, and at least when someone's on the floor, afford the Speaker the opportunity to speak. If you do raise on a point of order, let it not be a frivolous or spurious point or statement. Let it be a meaningful point of order. You may proceed, Premier.
You know, the great irony, I haven't done a head count, Madam Speaker, but I'm sure that when the Honourable Plato comes back, there will be more black members on the DA side of the House than the ANC side of the House. Anyway, the bottom line is, you tell me what black is.
Take a question? What?
Will you take a question?
You prepared to take a question?
I'm not prepared to take a question.
What did she just now define as black?
Honourable Francois, the Premier's indicated she's not willing to take a question.
You claim you black, but Minister Plato isn't black. Interesting.
Premier, please.
Again, we have standing proof of the ANC's racism. Black is whatever they say black is, and that's the end of the definition.
Proceed, please, Premier.
Now, I was answering another question of the Honourable Francois, who wanted to know about private security.
Sorry, if I may, Premier. Honourable Paulson, you are not to make personal reflections on a member. Thank you. Honourable Paulson, thank you.
They're sexist as well, Madam Speaker.
You may proceed, Premier. You may proceed, Premier.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I wanted to explain to the Honourable Fransman, who seems to be one of the very few people in South Africa who doesn't understand the principle, that armed policemen report to the executive in government. And the problem with armed policemen who account to the executive coming in to remove representatives of the people in the legislature crosses a fundamental boundary in a democracy whereby the executive can then prevent Parliament from holding them accountable by getting their policemen to remove members of Parliament every time they become troublesome. That is the principle at stake. And there is absolutely no comparison whatsoever with any private unarmed security that we might have got on the 5th floor, nowhere near the legislature, to protect visitors that we had invited to this House and, in fact, expecting unruly behaviour from the ANC. They were never going to come anywhere near the Parliament. They were never going to evict or eject any members of this House, and they were not accountable to the executive. They were private in their own personal capacity and not part of the law enforcement arm of the state that accounts to the executive. And that is constitutional democracy 101, Madam Speaker. But we have a leader of the opposition, whatever colour he is, who hasn't got a clue about these fundamental principles at the heart of a democracy. Not a clue. But Fransman is an honourable man. Now,
order, please, members. Proceed.
and so
Honourable
when
Premier.
that fundamental principle was violated in our Parliament, it would have been a scandal and, again, a slap in the face, as the ANC does to the voters of the Western Cape all the time, if we had not got up and walked out. Because our duty is to uphold the Constitution, which is why this party won the election in the Western Cape and not that party. Now, the only party that didn't want to be outdone, quite frankly, was the Honourable ANC, who tried to out-EFF the EFF the very next week here. They didn't want to be outdone. Now, when we talk about opportunity, and I've spoken about the redress that we've undertaken, we're the only province where land reform is working. We are the only province where BEE is really working and is not just an excuse for crony capitalism. Let me tell you, Madam Speaker, that the ANC loves using words that convey the exact opposite of what the ANC intends them to mean. It is exactly like the old National Party that talked about the Extension of University Education Act when they were actually segregating universities. The ANC speaks
Order,
about
please. Honourable Paulson.
BEE,
Order.
and the Honourable Doug Moores asked me to talk a little bit about it, and about empowerment, and about ownership in the economy. Let me talk about it a little bit. We believe very strongly in redress, and we apply it. But let me tell you a little bit about the rollout of broadband, which is in this plan. It's one of our game changers. We would have been 3 years further down the line, Madam Speaker, if our contract had not been stopped and we had to rewind by the Minister of DIPSA at the time, Lindiwe Sisulu, because she insisted that we work through the State Information Technology Agency. And they just got in the way. They're much better now. But Freeman Nomvalo is doing his best now, but they got in the way and delayed us for 2.5 years. We had an open tender as is required by the Constitution. We know exactly what the Constitution says about tendering. And so, Madam Speaker, for our broadband tender, we follow the Constitution, which says, when an organ of state in the national, provincial or local sphere of government or any other institution identified in national legislation contracts for goods or services, it must do so in accordance with a system which is fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective. So that's exactly what we did. And we gave the tender to the best bid, without any political interference or involvement whatsoever. And of course, that's best for the people that you're trying to serve, because our job is to make sure that every person in this province gets connected. Because you cannot be empowered in a knowledge economy, and you cannot be educated in an education environment that is increasingly technology-driven if there isn't high-speed, accessible, affordable broadband. And that is why getting the very best tender was critical. Madam Speaker, if anybody tenders for a contract and signs a contract, they can provide that within the tendered price, and they provided the best value for money. Economics 101, Madam Speaker, which the EFF would not.
Order, Honourable Paulson.
So, Madam Speaker, what did the national government do? In his State of the Nation address, President Zuma said they were going to roll out broadband, and then he said Telkom had been appointed as the lead agency. That is a euphemism for a monopoly. And there had been no open, free, fair, transparent, and cost-effective tender process as stipulated by the Constitution, not at all. What happened? The CEO of Telkom was given an exclusive hearing by the Forum of South African Director Generals to say why Telkom should have the monopoly on the rollout of broadband. And then it was presented to the Cabinet Lekgotla as a fait accompli, and then immediately a week later announced in the State of the Nation address. A monopoly for a company in which the state owns directly or indirectly over 50% of the shares. There's no incentive for them to produce a quality service within the price range. There's no accountability for them if they fail. Because for state-owned enterprises, there's always a bottomless pit, and the people who suffer are the people who have to be serviced by them. So now, like SAA, like Eskom, like Sanral, we can go on and on. And we see what a mess they make and how the poor primarily suffer, and there's always a bottomless pit of the taxpayers' money of the poor to bail out these cadres who get rich. That is the ANC's model of BEE. That is the ANC's model of economic transformation. It's unconstitutional, it's undemocratic, and it fails the poor, Madam Speaker. But what's more, Madam Speaker, it makes those in the know, the connected cadres, very rich indeed. Because the ANC is known for some time that they were going to give the monopoly on the broadband rollout to Telkom. Everything is a fig leaf after that, and it won't come as any surprise to you to know that within the space of a year, the Telkom share price rose from 12 Rand a share to 75 Rand a share when Telkom was given the monopoly. And I wonder how many connected cadres got very, very, very rich through a 6-fold increase of their investment. That is what the ANC calls transformation. That is what the ANC calls black economic empowerment. We follow the Constitution and the law. We get the best value for money. We don't steal poor people's money. We ensure that we insist on competitive tenders. We don't do insider trading, and we don't cover up our corruption with nice-sounding words, as the ANC does the whole time. And that Honourable Dugmore is the answer.
Member
We
Paulson.
stand for an open opportunity society for all, not a closed crony society for comrades only, so that the few can be enriched and the majority get poorer and poorer to the We absolutely do not. You do not. It's absolutely not the ideological approach. The bottom line is the ANC's ideological approach is patronage and crony enrichment and crony capitalism. That is what their approach is, but they pretend it's BEE and they pretend it's equitable. Because under the DA, life gets better for the poor. Let me just say something to the Honourable Dugmore.
Order, please. Honourable
Honourable
Premier.
Dugmore.
Sorry, if I could ask you just to take your seat. Honourable Paulson, interjections are allowed, but a running commentary is not going to be accommodated in this space. I have cautioned you earlier, however you persist with your running commentary. If you would afford the Premier the opportunity to speak. Thank you. Honourable Premier.
So this crony capitalism party, opposite side of the House, it is no wonder that wherever they govern, unemployment and inequality gets worse. Wherever the ANC governs, unemployment and inequality get worse, Madam Speaker. And you don't have to believe me. If you look at the rate of population migration, you will understand precisely why. I would never, ever, ever refer to people desperate for jobs as refugees.
Order, please, members.
The fact is that it is amazing that our economy has been able to grow fast enough to mean that only 22,000 of the desperately poor people who come and are welcomed in the Western Cape and looking for opportunities. I'm telling you exactly what the context was.
Order.
But let me tell you this, Madam Speaker. If you look at the statistics recently produced by Global Insight that studies the Gini coefficient, and has studied the Gini coefficient, across towns and cities in South Africa, the least unequal city in this country is Cape Town. The least unequal city in this country is Cape Town under the Democratic Alliance. And that is the truth. And it's because proportionately far more people are employed. That's why. Proportionately far more people are employed, despite the massive migration shifts that we've had. In fact, that is a misleading statistic. But the bottom line is this. If the economy grows and if the population grows faster, then you're going to have an increase in the unemployment rate. That's just a fact. But maybe we also have to do Maths Literacy 101 for the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Order. Honourable Fransman, if I may address you, Premier, if you could take your seat, please. We do not need racial undertones and innuendo around black or race. It was one of the principles we said we would agree to at the onset of the session. I hear you saying that it is a black thing. I think we should try and refrain from using colour and race in terms of this response. And if it is to be used, use it constructively, not as a parting or a sideswipe around a comment. I would like to ask you to try and respect that. Thank you.
Speaker, we've started off the day by respecting. We've seen in the Premier's reply, there's complete disrespect for the rules. That's where we are at this point. There's complete disrespect even for the rules that you've laid down. That is what the Premier has done. So at this point of time, there is no question about what we are dealing with here.
Honourable Fransman, I have not had any reason other than to ask the Premier to withdraw. In terms of the proceedings, my table staff are also keeping a close eye, and I have not had anything that you can say is untoward at this stage. Thank you. You may proceed, Premier.
Madam Speaker, I will never ever make a racial generalisation. I will never make a racial generalisation. Madam Speaker.
Kindly take your seat, please, Premier. Honourable Paulson. I need to warn you. I have asked you about your constant interjection. I'm putting this to you. Please refrain from constantly interjecting. Interjecting is one thing, but to do a barrage of constant feedbacks is not, it's inappropriate. So contain yourself and try and respect the fact that we have the speaker on the floor. You are certainly allowed to interject, but you cannot do a running diatribe, Honourable Paulson. You may address me.
Speaker, throughout this entire day, we've heard veiled innuendos about racism.
Honourable Wiley, please take your seat.
DA.
Sorry, there is
If
a
it's
member
not
on the
that
floor.
That we have short attention span. Now we must hear that
Honourable
we need to do math
Paulson,
literacy.
I'm
This is
sorry
veiled
I'm sorry to
racism.
interrupt you.
And the Premier's getting away with it all the time. She gets away with veiled racism.
Honourable
We've now
Paulson.
heard refugees being replaced by migrant population.
Honourable Paulson, points of order as I alluded to around procedural matters or any remarks that are unparliamentary. I alluded to that at the beginning. Honourable Wiley.
Yes, two things, Speaker. First of all, over and above the fact that he's challenging a ruling you've already made, he's speaking from the wrong seat. It's not his seat. He's on the other side of the bench. And that is also against the rules of this House.
You may take your seat.
Speaker, I can understand why where people say is very important.
Honourable Paulson.
Am I intruding here, Member Wiley?
Honourable,
Don't you like me here?
Honourable Paulson.
You didn't invite me here.
Honourable Paulson, in terms of the rules, I can only recognise you when you are in your appropriate seat. The point of order could border on veiled innuendo, which is a matter of interpretation. We are not going to go to innuendo. I alluded to that earlier. So kindly refrain from interjecting and please allow us to get on with the business of the day. Premier, you may proceed.
Thank you very much. The point that I was trying to explain to the Honourable Fransman was that in a context where the population of the Western Cape has grown by over 45%, it is a miracle that unemployment has only grown by 2.9% and not 5%, as Minister Patel erroneously said. That is the miracle, and that is Maths Literacy 101. And I will never ever make a racial generalization, Mr. Deputy Speaker, never. There are some stupid white people, there are some stupid black people, there are some stupid colored people. It's got nothing to do with race. Absolutely nothing to do with race. Now, what I would have said if I'd been able to give my State of the Province address is that I would have explained our strategic goals, of which there are 5, which I presume that people would have read in my speech, so I won't repeat them now. But we've also introduced a concept of game changers. And game changers are a very select number of major interventions that can have a real impact on the lives of citizens, on which we seek very specific and measurable outcomes and put in a lot of effort transversely across various government departments. And so, of course, our game changers, number 1, is to get energy security. Now, we desperately need energy security because if we don't have energy security, we don't have an economy. And if we don't have an economy, we don't have jobs. And if we don't have jobs, we have millions more unemployed people and desperate poverty. And we have a failed state. So energy security is obviously critically important. Now, I was fascinated to hear the President also saying energy security was important. But then he must explain why they have withdrawn the ISMO bill from Parliament that would have created competition in independent power producers, competition for Eskom. But of course the ANC does not want competition for Eskom because that undermines the crony insider deals that they do through their front company, Chancellor House, and through which they fund their election campaigns. So if it comes to the choice of having energy security that our economy needs, that we desperately need to create jobs and even just keep the jobs we've got. If it comes to a choice between doing that which South Africans, and especially poor South Africans, desperately need, and the choice of keeping the enriched cadres connected to the tenders and contracts, the ANC will choose the enriched cadres and the over-empowered cadres over the poor every single time. And then they have to explain the MPRDA bill, because if they're serious about energy security, that we're very serious about, Deputy Speaker, they would make it easier to prospect for oil and gas off our coast, not more difficult. But this particular bill and the chopping and changing and the pushback by communists like the Honourable Rob Davies against much more sensible policies by the Honourable Ramatlhodi, and by that I'm not saying that all whites are stupid, it is just that Honourable Davies has very stupid policies. Honourable Deputy Speaker, we would have been very far advanced with being able to use natural gas as an alternative source for energy. But if the ANC has to choose between exploring our natural resources of our coastline, like Mozambique is doing with great success now, or choosing crony deals that will enrich themselves, they will choose the crony deals every time. I have come to the conclusion, Deputy Speaker, that they would rather create an absolute energy crisis when the solutions are obvious: gas, green energy, wind, sun and waves. In the short term, they would rather continue the crisis and make it impossible for independent power producers to help us out of our energy crisis, so that one day the crisis gets so bad that everybody accepts that Putin and Jacob Zuma can do their nuclear deal and get involved in such corruption that it'll make the arms deal look like a picnic. That's what's behind this, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And so our number one game changer is energy security, and we will continue finding ways around this crisis. Otherwise, there will be no economy and there will be no jobs. And we've also driven Project Khulisa, which means cause to grow for those who don't understand Xhosa. And we're focusing on the sectors that have the greatest potential for economic growth and job creation. Just yesterday, the Honourable Minister Winde had a press conference describing what a bumper season we've had and how many jobs have been created in the tourism sector. And I would like to also add my thanks to the Honourable Opposition for choosing to have their 103rd birthday in the Western Cape, and I would like them to do that every single year. This is an open standing invitation to send their buses from all over South Africa. We wanted it greatly, and we really enjoyed the hundreds of thousands of rands that were sometimes spent per night in the pubs and the drinking holes on Blue Label whiskey and various other things. So our drinking holes enjoyed it very, very much indeed, and they made a lot of money. So we're inviting you, please, to come back every single year for your 103rd birthday, but make sure that you don't drive when you're under the influence of alcohol. So tourism, agri-processing and rig repair, that is, of course, if the ANC and the national government doesn't destroy all the prospects of using the oil and gas off our coast. Then I was really amazed when the Honourable Makaleni, who's now been talking through most of my reply, said we are doing nothing for the youth. Well, she must have missed what I wrote extensively in my speech about e-learning, about after-school programs, about our focus on a massive youth campus that we're going to be developing in Manenberg, and around all of the other projects, such as the Year Beyond project, all aimed at the youth. We have a massive focus on the youth in our strategic plan. Then we get to the Honourable Fransman's extraordinary distortion, and in fact, misleading statement. I don't know if it was deliberate, but I say misleading statement, that we are not interested in integrating the city. In fact, he knows, while he calls me a racist, that until I became the Premier and went to live in Leeuwenhof, I have never before lived in an area that was a white group area since I came to Cape Town. Never before. I was determined to live in integrated areas, and I made absolutely sure that I did, because it was my commitment, and it remains my commitment, Deputy Speaker, to ensure that we overcome the tragic legacy of apartheid. And you know, the Honourable Fransman and other speakers, such as the Honourable Magatla, have the complete nerve to come here and say that we're running a pilot project 20 years into democracy. Well, the Honourable Fransman was involved in purchasing the Conradi Hospital site with a group of his cronies. And they did nothing with it except enrich themselves over a period until we had to take it back and use a clause to get that property back to the provincial government. And now we are doing a pioneering project that will integrate living, and we are going to roll it out right across the spine of the city, along the N2, and ensure that we reverse the legacy of apartheid in the city.
Point of order or a question?
Point of order. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to ask for your judgment on the ruling with the Speaker made at the beginning of the House about no personal reflections on the integrity of members, and clearly what the Premier has just said, I would argue, could be interpreted as a reflection on the integrity of an honourable member.
Yes, Premier, I will have a look at the Hansard. The Premier referred to political actions by the member Fransman. I didn't hear that he was referring to him personally in his personal capacity, but I will look at the Hansard very carefully. There's a distinction between the two. Thank you, Premier. You may continue.
Very much. As I say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm sure you would never, ever be able to tolerate a situation where we had more freedom of speech outside this House than inside this House. Thank you. Now, the integrated better living model game changer is in fact part of our new housing model, which in fact disingenuously the Honourable Dugmore conflates with a human settlement strategy. They are two entirely different things. And so he comes and says, because I say we have a new housing model planned, he conflates that with a human settlement strategy, which the Department of Human Settlements is working up, and then says that I was trying to mislead the House. He can't distinguish one thing from another. He cannot distinguish one thing from another, and by that I'm not saying that all whites are stupid, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the National Minister has made it clear that despite the fact that when she was originally the Minister of Human Settlements, she announced that all informal settlements would be eradicated by 2014. Yes, she did. She announced that all informal settlements would be eradicated by 2014. She has come around to the fact that informal settlements are going to be tragically with us for a long time. And so, she has changed the entire subsidy scheme to make provision for a USDG and an HSDG. And the USDG, which makes provision for underground services, has rocketed, and the HSDG, for houses and top structures, has been sliced. Because the national government's policy is that we have to try and upgrade the conditions through in situ upgrading where people live. It's in the President's speech, it's in the National Development Plan, it's in the national government policy. And so we're the only government that has gone along with a model of saying, how can we bring a whole range of partners together to enable people to upgrade their living circumstances while the state fulfills its function and individuals and communities fulfill theirs.
Honourable Gideon?
I rise on a point of order.
Yes, I'm listening. Please raise your point.
Deputy Speaker, can you control the Minister of Human Settlements in the other side, please?
Gideon, that you can leave to the chair. The chair will decide. Please continue, Premier.
And so the great irony is that we have a national development plan that comes out of the presidency, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that gets accepted at the Mangaung conference of the ruling party, that gets accepted by every party in Parliament in the last administration, but that this government is the only government implementing through its plan and its game changers. And one of our game changers, therefore, is water and sanitation in poor communities. We have it now at the basic minimum norm set by national government, but we want to exceed that norm and ensure that people have much more dignity in access to clean drinking water and to sanitation. And that's why that is a game changer. Another game changer in our better living approach is the impact of alcohol and dealing with that. Drugs and alcohol are wreaking havoc in this province. Drugs and alcohol are wreaking havoc in this province.
Order.
In Yanga, where there aren't many DA farmers or any other farmers for that matter, alcohol is at the root of the crisis of crime, interpersonal violence, trauma, and social dysfunction. And unless we can deal with the crisis of alcohol abuse in this province, we will not come to grips with crime, interpersonal violence, attempted murder, car crashes, trauma, stabbings, and all the other things that we face on a regular basis. And so reducing alcohol abuse is a game changer, and certainly one of the things we'll be looking to do with cheap wine, Deputy Speaker, is to turn it into biofuel to power tractors rather than destroy human lives. That'll be one of the issues that we will look at very, very closely in our design lab to look at how we deal with this crisis. So, what we will do also is establish a delivery unit in the office of the Premier to ensure that these game changers are focused on, and that we, if we're ever allowed to make a speech in this Parliament to account to the voters, that we account on to the voters. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is the commitment on this side of the House, through not only our game changers, but the many, many programs and projects in our strategic plan. Under strategic goal 1, creating opportunities for growth and jobs, goal 2, improving education outcomes and opportunities for youth development, 3, increasing wellness, safety and tackling social ills, 4, enabling a resilient, sustainable, quality and inclusive living environment, underpinned by good governance and integrated service delivery through partnerships and spatial alignment. That is our commitment to the people of this province. I want to apologize to the people of this province on behalf of this House, as the Premier, accountable to them, that I was not able to deliver this plan as intended on the day of the State of the Province address. I am sure, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the people of this province will accept that we have participated in what they must think is a farce of a debate on a speech that was never given, because at least we respect the rules of this House. And while we are here, we will understand that a capable state, the rule of law, and accountability are the only pillars on which this country can succeed, and the voters can rely on us to deliver it. Thank you very much, Deputy.
Honourable Fransman, is that a point of order?
Speaker, I want to address you now. The Premier in a reply said, and I quote, no, this is a
Order,
this is a point of
I'm
order.
listening to the point of order. I haven't adjourned the House,
No,
yes?
this
I
is a
will,
point of order.
please continue, but do it swiftly.
The Jacob Zuma is busy with a corrupt deal with Putin, is that allowable for the Premier of the Western Cape in the House, which is part of a parliamentary process, to in fact invoke that point as a fact on the President of South Africa? And I want not necessarily a response now, but I want you to in fact look into the matter and give us a very clear ruling on this. Because what the Premier has said, that the President of South Africa is busy with a corrupt deal on energy with President Putin. So that I want you to investigate and report back to us.
I'm listening. Honourable Wiley, do you want to address me before I rule? Order, order.
I
Honourable Wiley.
suggest, Deputy Speaker, that
Order, order.
the fact or otherwise of the deal should be for the courts to decide and not for
Yes,
supposition.
Mr.
here.
Wiley, you're taking
May I raise-
order, order.
May I
Let
raise-
me just make a general comment, and that is that the chair cannot decide on the correctness or the correctness of the statement of the Premier. And secondly, the President or members on that side have no special protection in this House. We've ruled that before. But I will still look at the point of order in more detail. If there's a need to come back on a different view on that, I will do so. Honourable Wiley, I want to order, order, order. I've ruled on this point of order, Mr. Wiley.
It's not it's another point.
A new point of order?
Yeah, yes, it is. The minute of the last proceedings in the division, it notes that there were 26 A's, I think it was, when in fact the member of the ACDP was on our side. So that
I'll note that, Mr. Wiley. We will have a look. Order, 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 please. We'll have a look at the official whips signed off lists. That will be the guiding factor who were in the House and who were not in the House. That then concludes the debate and also concludes the business for the day. The House is adjourned.